And you told me that you had in mind the situation that the public schools of Philadelphia face today. They don't have enough money. They're having difficulty with enrollment. Students are leaving. They're having problems with violence in the schools. The way schools in Philadelphia are managed now is different than it has been historically. This has all created the perception that the Philadelphia public schools, and this is by no means exclusive to Philadelphia, urban school districts elsewhere face the same challenges, but the Philadelphia public schools are failing. In fact, I think if you asked the average person on the street what they thought of public schools, many of them would say public schools are failing. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not teaching children. They're failing to get children to where they need to be. Well, how have we gotten to this place in the history of the Philadelphia public schools and the history of urban education? How have we gotten to this crisis of confidence in public education that is really what the Philadelphia school crisis, which you asked about, is really all about? I think we've gotten there from a variety of directions. People perceive schools as failing because so many public school students don't do well on standardized tests, which is something we've been talking about from the very beginning. And our reliance on standardized tests was given an enormous shove by federal legislation, the No Child Left Behind Act, which was adopted by Congress and signed by the President in 2001, which mandates all of these tests for students at 5th grade level, 8th grade level, and high school to see if they're making what is called adequate yearly progress toward the educational goals that adults have set for them. Why was No Child Left Behind enacted? It was enacted because over the last 40 years, we've changed from believing that public schools can be made to work to believing that public schools really aren't and shouldn't be the only option because they can't be made to work in many cases. And I think the reason for those concerns about public education are sometimes valid and sometimes not. Can schools do everything that we expect them to do? We ask public schools to do an awful lot. Not just teach students how to read and write and how to know something about American history or foreign languages. We ask students to become the success that we hope they can be. We ask schools to solve all kinds of social and economic problems. Schools are perceived to be the stepping stone to success. But what if the kid comes from a family that has no money? What if the kid comes from a home where he doesn't get breakfast in the morning? What about children in poverty? What about children from families where there's no dad? Can the school compensate for those kinds of problems? We've asked the schools to do more, I think, than they are capable of doing. Or in other words, we've made public schools into a panacea. If we just give the problem to the public school, somehow they will be able to solve it. Well, we've discovered that they can't. Certainly not with the level of support that public schools have been afforded. And in the last generation, the level of public support for education, financial support, has plummeted. At one time, the state of Pennsylvania accounted for about 50 cents on every dollar spent by each individual school district. In other words, the state appropriation was half of the local school district's budget. This was in the 70s. Now it's less than a third. So we've taken away a lot of money, and in big cities where the tax base is shrinking, how are you going to find the resources to do what we ask schools to do? It costs money to run schools, and if they don't have the resources, and if their student body becomes increasingly composed, as in Philadelphia, of children from low-income households, you have essentially built failure into the equation. So, how is the district in crisis? Why is it in crisis? In some, because we expect too much of schools and we don't give them enough money.
Are vouchers the solution for improving education in the school district?
Some people believe they are. Essentially, they are saying public education should be like buying a car. Let the buyer beware. If you get a lemon, well, that's too bad. It's your fault for not being a good enough consumer. Should public education adopt a consumer-based strategy? That's what vouchers are all about. I give you a piece of paper which says that this piece of paper is the equivalent of $10,000 in tuition, although it's usually not anywhere near that amount. It's much less. And then you get to go out and buy the schooling for your child or for yourself that you want. Well, some people come to the marketplace very well informed. When they go out to buy a car, they go online and they research every dealer and they know everything they could possibly need to know about a particular model. Other people walk into a showroom and they get sold a crappy old car that won't go for more than 10 miles, right? Should something as important as a child's education be treated like buying a car? Well, some people say absolutely it should, because parents know what's best for their children, and we disrespect parents if we don't think they can make the kinds of decisions for their children's education that all other parents can. I wish that were true. I don't think it is. So I don't think vouchers are the answer, because they apply to something that should be organized for the common good, public schools, a model which is essentially free enterprise or consumer-based, like buying something in a capitalist economy that, in the end, you have to live with, whether it's good for you or not.